Hey guys, it's Fifth Lauren, also known as 944. Don't forget Thorin's YouTube channel.
Okay, this is going to be episode 62 of Counterpoints. And you know what, Moses?
Here we go.
we start the episode, right? And here's the thing. Normally, I have some sort of shite to talk to you about. I don't know, reference the episode number, some sort of indulgent story about our own lives or whatever. I don't really actually have anything for the beginning of this one. But all the same, I still do want to just make sort of awkward small talk and rapport with you, because you have to understand, like, a lot of people, I'll take them behind the veil for a moment, Moses. A lot of people who watch these shows are very naive because they've only seen basically shows that try to copy television where, you know, it starts, it's like, welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host, Bill Benetton, and your guests for the today, and then they like, introduce each of the guests, you know, you can tell the person doing the hosting probably barely knows the guest himself, you know, he's got like a little sheet he's reading from. But I actually realised that's actually a terrible system, because the key thing is you introduce the guest immediately and then people are like thinking about the guests, etc. Whereas you have to realise on this show, like the first 10 minutes where we're talking now are like the best 10 minutes of some of these people's lives that go on this show. So let's at least make it worth it. Let's build it up. Let's hype it a little bit, Moses. Let's get them excited. Let's get them. Let's make that 10 minutes where they don't talk, where they just listen to us and we just did self-indulgently talk, even though we could talk at any time on any show, even without them. Let's make that part so hype that when they finally do talk, everyone in the whole community can judge them on the first thing they say. And if it's wrong, just turn off the episode and never view any of their content, never listen to them, downvote everything they ever publish on the internet, and fucking burn them to the end of the earth. So all I'm saying is, better come with that heat straight away. So,
I like...
Let's call this baptism of fire.
I like the awkward smiles that they have to have on their
good,
face
isn't it?
in the section where they just can't say anything quite yet, but they just have to sit there and take it.
It's where they do the classic move, which is like, I don't even know, we're going to have to come up with a term for it. It's where Thorin says something on a show, you want to acknowledge that you're not against everything he said, therefore not to annoy him, but at the same time, you want to let the
distance yourself.
You're part of the show, yeah, but you also want to maintain a healthy distance. Like at any moment in time, you want to be able to back out of that half smile and say like, oh, I just felt obliged to do it, you know, I didn't actually agree with any of the things he said about insert any Mad Libs type country in the world and or religion and anything, yeah. What's mad, you know, the sad thing is I've just realised that actually would be a pretty shit fucking merchandising option for me, Thorin Mad Libs, because it's like there's too many options, isn't it? It's like, I think underscore is underscore country and adjective. I mean, how many haven't I done myself? At this point in time, there's none left for the fans, is there? It's like, I think Germany is good. Yeah, there we go. That's a good one.
You've shut down half the world to yourself, haven't you? You're running out of countries to go to. Well, actually, it's not that bad. It's only 2.
It's only 2. And to be fair, it's not 2 of the best, is it? So, listen, if HLTV.org makes a top 10 countries of the year list, well, ironically, they probably would vote fucking Brazil top 10, wouldn't they? Because, you know, I mean, by their logic, if Coldzera is just really good, then everyone in his team's really good. But enough about other websites and other things that exist in the community. We'll finally do it. We'll just introduce the guests to get on with it, shall we? So in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got Bleh. Again, terrible alias. Like, I actually do generally believe it doesn't matter what your alias is, you know, because if you do a good enough job, you eventually become associated with that name. A bit like, I always give the example, like, Get Right and Forrest are 2 of the best examples ever, because these aren't particularly cool aliases. Like, Get Right, especially the way it's spelled, is not cool at all. But in your brain, it seems cool now, because it legendary player did so much shit. Yeah, so, like, now he's the man for it, you know. Same with the Forrest, it looks fucking baller. But the problem with that is, like, it doesn't work for Bleh, though, does it? Like,
just gotta live with it, man.
You'd have to be really...
I'm stuck with it, kind of, at this point.
I mean, I'm waiting for it to kick in, but it just stays the same.
You'd have to be so badass to elevate that.
You would.
I'm living in hard mode, though, so it's fine, dude.
Yeah, you are doing that. He is doing that.
That is true. He is grinding it. That's true. He's going hard mode. Right, well, anyway, now that we've uncomfortably discussed your alias, the other guest on the show is called Dualism. Out of choice. She called herself Dualism out of choice. Because presumably, I mean, I'm going to have to guess here, that would probably represent the dichotomy in man's soul over, does he like move towards beauty and aspire to greatness in life, Or does he just stay down in the muck and the mire of all human flaws of character and personality, supporting Smiths? You know, those are it's the dichotomy of life. Welcome to the show.
Our last name,
Thanks.
Okay, so anyway, we'll just get that out of the way at the beginning. Like, as sort of a caveat. So,
defend yourself, Phoebe.
Exactly.
Go back at him. Don't let him do that.
I can't defend my position on Smiths.
Here's the thing: when some people say that they're a fan of Smiths, what they mean is like he has been in a lot of teams with me. He knows how to play the game. I tell him, and he go to yeah. Obviously, we know Shocks likes him, but what's bizarre is just to get out of the way at the beginning, you are actually legitimately a fan of Smiths, the player, as well. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. As in, like, you enjoy watching the players. You don't just not what you wish he could be, but what he is now.
Not this year and not the year before, but yeah.
Okay.
Back in the CZ era, I think that Inferno and Dust 2 Smiths with the CZ.
People don't know, but he was pretty good at one point in time.
Yeah, he was really good.
It's pretty legit. It was no joke. I mean, you know, unfortunately, it's like the fucking Simpsons, isn't it? Like, yeah, it was brilliant for the first 7 seasons. It lasted about 25 more after that, of course. So, you know, you kind of got bored of it by the end. But
Simpsons is still on now, isn't it?
I think it might still be on.
It
is.
Fucking gross. What are they doing?
I don't know.
Well, South Park is still on, and South Park started to go down the deep end too, hasn't it? No one watches South Park? All right.
To some degree.
Haven't watched in a while.
Well, now we can finally play the game. So, Duncan, what are we talking about this week?
Right. Here's the thing. The plan was to talk about the major, but I've just realised there's still a couple of weeks
it's
until
2 weeks
then.
away.
So we could do that. So I would say what we do instead is this. Let's just talk about some of the teams at the major and then see how it goes. And then if we want to expand it more and talk more, we'll talk more about them. If not, I mean, I don't really have a set topic we have to talk about. So...
Whoa!
What about this?
This is actually legit. That Big is looking to replace Smooya on the roster. I thought we were just doing like the pre-show joking was like a general.
No.
We've been laughing about this.
When I said rumor, I meant like a real, like reported rumor,
bloody
as
hell.
opposed to the kind where people just make them up.
So Nex is coming back. He's already had his surgery. He's already been through recovery. That six-man lineup is looking good.
Okay. What about that then? Let's talk about that since that's the hot topic. What do you think, Bleh, about Big replacing Smooya? Because obviously they've only just made this new lineup with Xantares anyway. They've only just had one tournament to play at, which was the 4-team E-League Invitational. To be fair, I mean, if you consider Cloud9 didn't even have the real in-game leader and the real fifth player, on paper, Big should have been in the finals. I guess they did underperform for expectations, you know, with what you'd hope would happen if you had Xantares. What do you think of a world in which Big actually doesn't use Smooya? If they bring Nex back,
Makes it a little interesting, right? I think Tapson can op. I do believe he could pick that role up, but I think they kind of like seem a little lost at the moment, which I'm surprised. I think they're looking decently solid. Let's not fool ourselves. They're not exactly a top 5 team at the moment, or at the bottom of top 10. They have a lot of they do have a lot of potential with Xantares getting picked up. They look pretty promising, to be honest. At E-League, I didn't expect much from them. But this is kind of surprising. I thought they were looking to build up with what they have right now. With Nex coming back, that makes things a little interesting. And especially right before the major, that's going to be a lot of work having to be put in like a couple of weeks or something. Very questionable decision, in my opinion.
What do you think, Phoebe? What's your take?
I think the fact that they were already discussing language issues and Xantares not having good English at all. Is he gonna learn German then? Is he gonna have to do that on the team if they get rid of Smooya? Which seems even more difficult than just English, because there isn't a sort of outlet for that. Like, you can play FPL and do all of that for English, but for German it seems a bit harder, I guess.
The problem with this is I can't remember who they were referring to, but I think it was implied that Xantares, like, I know that obviously Godby can speak Turkish, so I know that side, but I can't remember if someone implied that Xantares knew any German at all. It doesn't seem that plausible, but I'm not sure.
I have to imagine they're going to do English, and then they'll just have Godby to be able to translate to Turkish for the more complicated and to like help him, practice and everything. I don't know. I guess it's kind of hard. I don't like this move from like a in-game team player perspective, especially if it's Nex coming back in, which is, I mean, I assumed he was going to be out for a while doing recovery, but Smooya just gives that team like a whole other gear that they can get to that I think they'll be missing. But on the other hand, I can't blame them as much as I think it's silly in terms of like in-game performance if he's not dedicated, if he's not wanting to practice. And we've seen some weird back and forth tweets from him over the past whatever long he's been on Big, where he's kind of questioned how dedicated he wants to be and everything, and underestimating how difficult it was to be a top player on a top team. So it's one of those weird situations where if it's personality, if it's, you know, dedication issues, then fair play. But otherwise, I think it's kind of a silly move because you're just replacing one of your stars with another player who's already proven that he's inconsistent in his career, as good as he can be.
The weird part is that, yeah, the phrasing that there was used in the report on VP Esports is that, like, Smooya chose to bench himself, which, by the way, to break that down, like, first of all, obviously that entirely could just be a story they concocted together and all agreed to post, but there's also a world in which, like, you have to also think, even if Smooya himself did say that, like, say he went to the team and said, oh, you know, I don't think I'm playing very well, or I'm having problems doing whatever you're asking me to do, so replace me if Nex is available, you know, even if that's the case, that's not like the team is obliged to do that. Like, if you really thought Smooya was the better player, you'd tell him, like, no, you know, like, we need you for this tournament, or, you know, we'll figure it out in a few months, or just play again and we'll see how it goes, you know. So it is kind of a bit telling, if there's any truth to that at all, that they've executed that as a plan even. Because if I would expect the other way around, that it'd be like, oh, we've removed Smooya because, you know, we decided he didn't play well or he didn't fit the system or whatever. Because what's bizarre is if you watch Big play, I think you'd be very hard pressed to explain why you'd take Smooya out of the lineup. Like, if you knew nothing about the players, you turned all the nameplates off and you just watched them in the game, clearly he's had massive impact for that team. But I will say, like, that type of a player, this is where it's different to be a fan and to be an in-game leader, because the type of in-game leader God B is, where he wants to do things exactly the way he's prepared them in practice, that's actually not that great to have a Smooya type of player, because since they're doing a lot of, like, spontaneous moves in the game, when they work, if you're a fan, you're like, oh, that's amazing. But it's like, actually, as an in-game leader, that's not as reliable. Like, you can't really know what that guy's going to do in that moment. So unfortunately, when I look at Smooya's record, like, he can be very, very good in some games. But I will say, he has had a number of quite memorable, like, big games where it was like, you know, the last game they got eliminated from the tournament, where he's had really bad performances. And if you're an in-game leader, that unfortunately might stick in your mind more than the ones where you're way above the level you'd expect against some other opponent.
I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but I remember when I was at E-League, this is just 3 days ago, I tweeted out that Automatic is becoming a really good AWPer, and he's one of my favorite and exciting to watch at the moment for me. And Smooya responded to it, and when I read the tweet, I remember thinking, oh, you know, Smooya's pissed about something, because it just, I don't know if I was just, you know, creating that myself, but he said, because he has enough freedom to do as he wishes, but is insanely smart, knows when he should use it and not. And that felt to me like Smooya feels like, you know, he's being confined too much and he's being restricted too much on plays he wants to make. He's being told not to make them and that he can't make them. And again, yeah. I could be just reading something that's not into it. But I would imagine that's the case in a GOB system, especially as you're trying to incorporate Xantares as well.
Because, like, another part of the problem for me is, like, actually, whenever I think of Smooya at his best, it is making players like that. And so the problem is, you need the freedom to be able to do that. And to be honest, actually, the way he plays in Big, I think it would actually be counterproductive to their overall team style to give him too much freedom, unfortunately. Like, if he was Tabson, so fair enough, do what you want. Like, you're the best player, you're very well-rounded, etc. The problem is, Smooya is just so up and down in his performance, which I think comes from playing style. It's like, that's the reason I always tell you, generally, I'm not that big a fan of that type of AWPer. Because if you think of them historically, it's just like Henny, fucking Skadoodle, Chris J. Not Skadoodle, Chris J rather, maybe. Who would I say instead of... Maybe Shazam instead of Skadoodle.
I was gonna say Smooya's the kind of AWPer that it looks like he just grew up watching, like, Kenny S and JW and you know, demos when he was back in, like, 2012, 2013.
Like, for highlights, he's dynamite. Yeah, exactly. It's just they don't have, like, the boring part of the AWPing. Like, it's funny that is the fucking meme, that Guardian one of, like, Olofmeister and Guardian, about how Olofmeister's so boring. Because, like, Guardian's a good pick, obviously. He was always famously the guy who hit all the insane AWP shots. But actually, most AWPers, it would be the other way around, wouldn't it? You'd really rather watch a rifler who's getting 3 kills every round than an AWPer who just kills 2 people on the first angle he watches. Like, that's the most boring play in the world to watch. So here's the question, then, is, based on what you've seen of Big, and imagining a world, we don't know yet, obviously this time, where they might go to the major and not use Smooya. Was Big with Xantares and Smooya better than Big without Xantares? And will Big without Smooya be good at the major? What do you think, Phoebe? Where are you going on this one?
I think I just don't. On paper, it just doesn't add up to me, this new lineup, and I think it would be difficult with the sort of other teams there for them to even keep the Legends spot at this point with the lineup now, because I think it will just have too many issues.
Because the other detail for everyone, by the way, just for context, is if you remember, the changes to the format also mean that you can't fluke a legend spot pretty much now. Like, you have to play at least one best of three. You know, it's actually, in theory, it's less likely you can do sort of the miracle run that some teams have done in the past. So it's going to be a lot harder, you would assume. You'd have to be like a proper series level team. What do you think, Bleh? Where do you go on this one?
I kind of agree. I think it's kind of a weird move, but just to touch upon the language aspect, right? I think it's kind of like overblown out of proportions, because if you think about it, sure, Xantares can't really speak English that well, but it's Counter-Strike. You don't need to like speak the language to a very high level, right? As long as you can speak Counter-Strike CS English, I think that should suffice. The guy does play FPL, and the team has been calming in English for quite a while right now with Smooya, and they've been getting some pretty good placement. So I don't think the language issue is going to be a big deal. So Xantares can, at least on paper, fit in well into this team, and obviously Nex has been playing, with them for a while as well. So I don't think it's going to be a big issue, but I do agree that Smooya has been the X factor in this team, right? If you look at Big, look at the way Gopi calls, the way the team approaches CS, Smooya is kind of I wouldn't say the X factor, but he's kind of like the wild card, so to speak. He has his plays, he can go for certain plays, and sure, I mean, It's a very tough call to make, but considering the time span they have right now and kicking out Smooya, considering that many of the setups and many of the maps where they play on, he is one of the instrumental players with that AWP of his. I think this new lineup, if Nex is going to be replacing Smooya, I think it's going to, I wouldn't say fail miserably, but it's not going to perform to the level of, let's say, a Smooya and Xantares playing together.
I think Xantares is a good enough talent that I don't think we're going to notice any like steep drop off of like, I don't think they're going to blow up our expectations like either way, either positive or negative. I think they'll pretty much stay right the same as where they are now. So I mean, depending on where you hold them, I guess that might change, but I just think missing that dynamic up is going to be tough in the long run. I think it's going to really limit their ability to make deep runs in a lot of tournaments. I think they're going to miss that factor unless, like we've seen other riflers do recently, Tapson is just going to become a god tier upper because Automatic's doing it, Device has done it. You're going to start seeing, I think, more riflers switch into upping and be able to play the boring non-highlight style and be able to do it well. So that'll be interesting.
I think this just puts way more pressure on God B overall because, I could totally believe there's a world in which, obviously, no matter how much you can criticize Nex's individual game, he has played in a lot of teams of God B. I'm sure he does whatever he's told within the concept of what they do, whether he gets the kills or not. So I could see a world in which it makes the team more what God B wants it to be, but also makes them a team with less chance of causing upsets. So as a result, I'm not really that big a fan of the move overall, but unfortunately, an in-game leader's perspective is going to be very different on that because he's not thinking about the move now. He's thinking to himself, I'm going to get them to this level in 2 months and we're going to add this stuff in. It's I don't know about that. That's why the whole angle of him benching himself is the part that I'm not even a fan of him saying that really, because that makes it sound like, what, can he just choose to unbench himself? So he just says in a month, I'm not benching him, but what, is he back now? He actually asks more questions than answers when he says that.
I'm imagining that this is the first step of them having that 6-man lineup they wanted, where he's benched and maybe he'll be on the bench for a month or two, and then he'll come back in for Nex or something. But it just seems super weird. And like I said, I have to imagine this would be, if there's any reason that Smooya is getting benched or removed from the team on a more permanent basis, I have to imagine it's going to be because of dedication or attitude or really getting drained by the competitive aspect of the pro scene. That's what I would have to guess. But I mean, the other question would become, if you're benching yourself or if you're being benched, what is it you're planning on doing on the side? Is he going to be streaming? Is he going to be, trying another game? Is he just going to disappear? That's kind of always the other question of the equation for me.
The report did say that he is looking out for other offers from different teams. So,
all right, well,
yeah.
fucking hell. All right. We'll go to Mouse Sports. They don't practice.
that part actually does, in that scenario, make it seem plausible he did ask to be benched then, as in, like, even as in he thought from his perspective, like, oh, this team's not going to go any further than this and whatever. As if we tie in what Moses said before about the automatic comment, perhaps he didn't actually enjoy what he did in this team, and so either you had to have way better results to justify it, or you want to go and play the style of play you want to play. Can't hit on that. I'm not really a fan, obviously, because what teams are going to go to? There's not really many available that are going to pick him up, unfortunately.
This is what's kind of fucked up. I mean, we touched on this in the last episode, Nuggets. We don't have to go too deep onto it, but like, where is the responsibility for a player to just like, how can you be signed to a contract and get paid a salary? And I'm not trying to bash Smooya specifically. There's probably plenty of other players, but how can you be signed to a contract getting paid to play, and then when they say we need you to fill this role, you just say no? Like, that doesn't make much sense to me. Like, if you're getting paid to be on this team, and the in-game leader or the manager wants you to play a certain way or a certain style, or the coach is kind of trying to direct it into a certain style, don't you have a responsibility to just kind of fill that, like, do the best to your abilities to try and learn that way?
Depends if you're the sort of person who believes that teamwork makes the dream work. Some people don't, Moses. Some people just, they want to succeed themselves. They want to have fun.
All right. Girls just want to have fun. Right, Bleh?
They want everything nowadays, mate.
I would know about
becoming half this motherfucker or more, so... Like, what all this there? Yeah, go on.
No, I think Moses touched on a good point when it comes to, like, at least in the Asian scene, right? You talk about all these young stars like Fancy Attacker, to a lesser degree the new Tyloo lineup, but if you look at the Vici guys, for example, right, it's a similar mentality where they're like, hey, I'm a star player, I can get these 30 kills, 45 kills, whatnot, drop a bomb. I don't want to comply to your call to do a structure. And that's a very common thing I do see in the Asian scene, even to the Australian scene to a certain degree, where these potential star players, right, these playmakers, they just hate being hampered down with a system and just want to, have fun, but they don't really understand, hey, you're playing to win, you're playing in an org. They don't have a sense of professionalism, dare I might say, And I kind of see where he might be coming from. I don't agree with it necessarily, but yeah.
Well, funny thing is, right, when I've noticed, because at the end of last year, some people made, obviously, like, frag movies for the year and stuff. And I noticed that whenever anyone made any videos where they were trying to, like, show the best strats from Astralis, like, here's the best executes they have, etc. Like, when you're watching that video, it looks, oh, wow, imagine how fun it would be to be on this team. Like, when you come in the site, they've cleared 3 angles, they've flashed someone off, like, no one could be checking anywhere. That sounds really fun, right? The part that people don't realize if they're, like, a random NA pro is, like, first of all, the practice to get that down perfect is a fucking nightmare. Like, that's not fun at all. Yep. And then secondly, you're only looking at the guy who runs past all those smokes and shoots the people in the head. Like, the guy who runs out, who creates the space for him to do that and just gets smashed in his face immediately. Not only is that not even fun in Astralis, but if you're on any team not at Astralis competence level, that's going to be a nightmare doing that role. Like, enjoy that. So it's like the amount of sacrifice that has to go in to make that strat look so easy and so much fun to play is like, that's actually not fun, mate. It's like you've just got you've delayed the gratification. The fun is when you make that strat work in pro level and you just dominate in other top teams, but everything that goes up to that is not going to be fun. So unfortunately, it might sound mad because fans wouldn't believe this. There are actually pro players who want to have fun every time they play. They want, even if they play a game, like, that's why a lot of them in scrims don't get that much out of it. They're playing the scrim as if it was like a warm-up match or something, like, as though they're trying to flex their muscles or some shit, like.
Yeah.
Sounds weird, but the funny thing is, though, it's the same in sports as well. I'm sure there's sportsmen who don't take it as seriously, and think they're just testing how fast they are in practice or some shit.
Yeah, but there's also, 11 players. So you got to imagine if there's one of those, there's 10 people taking it serious.
Sure.
At least in football, right? So, it kind of gets mitigated when there's that many people.
Okay. Right, dualism. It's your job now to pick either a team or a topic. So what would be an interesting topic to discuss, do you think? Who are you interested in at the moment?
And don't say G2. G2's not
You can if you want, but the problem is, there's a lot
not
of heathens around here and heretics that don't understand.
I mean, I think isn't the obvious thing maybe North, or at least North and Optic sort of combined?
That's a good one.
So, first of all, by the way, I know, even though everyone's not doing it on purpose, because North and Optic are sort of in a similar bracket of, like, player strength to how underwhelming they are, like, performances are quite similar, obviously both Danish teams, both teams. The other thing is, every time everyone says North and Optic, I think everyone secretly just means like shuffle the two teams, shuffle them, just put the two teams together and then see what the bet. But it's like I always say this, like you have to realize the downside of that concept is right. The reason why the French shuffle happened is because in every single scenario, it was clear which organization had the power, like which one had the leverage over the other one by having the players that had to be part of the shuffle. In the North and Optic one, the flaw with that one is you can't really have a shuffle because both teams have sort of like a similar level of quality player. And so it's like, why would I trade the bad players from this team for your good players? Or more importantly, why would you accept that? So either way, whoever accepts like the shit end of the deal, it's hard to make that work. That's actually the reason why in traditional sports, they have to have the whole salary cap angle, because it's the only way you can get people to take a shit deal for them that in the long run helps them and in the short term helps you, and you take the short term advantage on it. You know, like you can't. The problem with the North Optic one is like I agree with it. Like it would be a great team to shake up, but I don't really see how you get the other side to agree to it. So Bleh, where do you come on this one? Pick one of them, North or Optic. Which one do you want to talk about?
Let's talk a little about North because I did see them like most recently at the minors, right?
So what are your thoughts on them?
What a shit show, right? You look at Valde, the guy is a beast. I mean, I just feel so terrible for the guy. I was just like looking at some of the stats he had, and the guy's literally like every game they win, he has a top frag or he has to have the highest impact rating or whatever, right? And that is ridiculous. Like, poor guy. And if you look at that lineup, it's like, firstly, I don't know what the hell Caden's doing. I mean, that game where they lost to Vici was abysmal, I'll be very honest. It's not like Vici didn't play bad. Let's not take it away from them. They had some pretty cool moments here and there, but North were not even trying. I kind of felt like some of those rounds were ridiculous. Something which I didn't even see back when MSL was calling for them, right? There was at least some semblance of an idea of the way they were playing Counter-Strike back then, but now it's more like all over the place, you know, just hoping to get some kills, hoping to just go and try and just win those aim deals. And I'm sorry, you only have Valde. And this time Kirby did step up, but apart from that, no one else would like hitting the shots. Like, just like everything was just falling apart. The fundamentals are missing, so to speak, from a team's perspective, right? So I would personally just like take Valde and Kirby, take those two guys, save those two, and try something brand new. I don't care, like even if you have to maybe buy out some of the Optic players, I don't know, maybe like pick up Refresh, maybe get, I don't know, NateDOhDoubleG or whatever, something fresh, because this kind of failed. I mean, like, where do you go from here, right? And I think it was Pimp who was on the desk, and he was like, this loss just might be death knell for this particular lineup. I do not see this particular lineup playing together, at least in the foreseeable future. So yeah, take Valde out, take Kirby out, and start fresh.
Okay, bold. Right, what do you think, Dualism?
I mean, I think that there are a lot of, okay, not the best players, but there are enough Danish players that if both teams wanted to try new people or somebody who's upcoming, like the ex-Fragsters guys and a bunch of other names, there are at least options for them to at least try, because if what's working now just isn't working, you might as well just try something. Because, yeah, when North tried Mertz, fair enough, Mertz wasn't a good fit for North, but he found a good fit in Heroic, and at least bringing those names to the front could at least lead to something good for either team.
What do you think, Moses? Because like the angle I have to say that makes the North scenario very different from most other teams. People miss this as well. It's funny. So at the end of last year, part of everyone celebrating Astralis' success was also like giving all that credit to the infrastructure they have. Like, oh, you know, they have the sports psychologist, and they have, you know, like people manage their diet, and you know the way they practice is very professional. And they've taken on when people mention all that, I notice no one bothers mentioning, oh, by the way, North's doing a lot of that shit as well, and you see how their results are. Like, no one wants to mention that because it's not a cool narrative to tie into North fucking failing, because it's cool when you do all that stuff and you succeed and you're the best and no one can touch you. So the reason I bring that up, Moses, is because it was implied that part of the reason North has made these really big moves, letting Config go, letting other people go from the lineup, removing MSL, etc., was actually something to do with not just like a player decision. It was along the lines of like, this is the vision we have for the team, and you know, these are the sorts of players we want. Like, I believe they said something a bit strange regarding when they removed Nico after only like 2 events and traded him for Gade. They said something along those lines that, you know, he wasn't like in like the mold of the type of player they wanted or something. So to me, it makes it real tough to guess how they're going to go with the org, because if you're trying to make it like a sports team approach where you want a certain type of player, whether it's mentality wise or style wise, it obviously becomes very different from how I would pick players. So what do you think of the North squad, Moses?
I actually agree with them on that, but I mean, I agree with them while also freely admitting that they have failed in that venture, right? Like if you're going to cut config and Magisk at a certain point, and then eventually you cut the in-game leader who made those decisions and bring in Kirby, and you're still failing, like, you know, fair play. Your goals that you've set, at least for the short term, are gone. I'm fine with it, but you have to make it work somehow. And I think the biggest thing that this just showed me is that, you know, for all the talk that we've had about Denmark being the deepest region in terms of talent, in terms of in-game leaders, it almost feels like we've been sold a bill of goods. Like if your second best team can't make it through the minor and can't make it through the third placement match after all this hyping up that Europe needs more slots for the major, then like I think that's a real thing. Then all of a sudden, like this is kind of embarrassing. You know, now we not only do you not have MSL, who is supposed to be the next best in-game leader, now you have Snappy, who's also struggling to make an Optic team work, who's supposed to be very good in-game leader when it comes to like building up talent and all these different in-game leaders at the various stages of the Counter-Strike scene. If I'm North, or if I'm anyone in the scene that needs a fifth, like say if I'm like Cloud9 even though you don't have your roster figured out, I'm trying to get Volda. I'm trying to see what it's going to take to pry him over to the States and bring him in as your permanent fifth. You know, there are plenty of other teams obviously that could use a Volda, but outside of that on North, I don't see a lot of players that I would want to take any kind of significant risk on considering a buyout. Like I wouldn't want to take KRB at the moment. I'm not taking AZ. And I just don't see a lot of the value in these players that are on these two rosters that have been put in situations and with all the backing, whether it's North, whether it's the Optic organization, and you're not able to make it through qualifiers with tier 2 to 3 teams, and you're not able to make it through the minors, and you're not even able to put up a good performance in the minors if you're someone like Caribou, who's supposed to be a star. And that's the thing. Normally I would feel bad about criticizing him, but he left Astralis to be the badass of North. And sure. it's not happening. So, I mean, you have to be able to levy some of that criticism at him. I just don't see a lot of value for any of these players. I think the most interesting thing that's happened to North in the past, 8 months is Wimp's outburst on Twitter after they got eliminated, saying how embarrassing it was. That was the most compelling thing to me about that whole team, was finally someone didn't say, we're going to bounce back stronger. Finally, someone said the truth, and that's embarrassing, and that this can't happen. They got blown the fuck out in that third place qualifier, or whatever, the last chance play-in, whatever you want to say. It's unbelievable to me that it's even possible.
You know, the funny thing is, that's exactly why I like initiatives like that minor play-in thing that they added. It's the same reason I actually told people years ago that I was so happy when we got the first ever offline qualifier for the major. Because for people who don't know, before that, we used to just have online qualifiers that got you through to the major for the last spots that weren't like the legend spots. And luckily, in the old days, there weren't that many top teams, so the good teams basically always made it. But then once we finally got the offline qualifier, as people might remember, that was the time when famously the whole Luminosity story, they weren't Luminosity at the time, when they got Flusher contributed that money and they went to Katowice and they made it to the offline qualifier. Well, the point I always made about that was the two teams who qualified from that qualifier was the Kaboom or Keyd Stars, whichever they were at that point in time, from Brazil, and then, well, it wasn't Renegades, it was like Vox Eminor or whatever from Australia. And the key reason why I always said that qualifier was so great is because if you'd have just had a regional qualifier and those two teams qualified, just because it would seem correct, you would have said, oh, this is bullshit. For example, I remember some of the teams that didn't make it, the Dignitas team from, Denmark would have beaten Luminosity if they'd have played them. It's like, well, that's a good thing. If you have the qualifier, you actually know. So the same thing for this minor play-in. Everyone, myself included, if you hadn't had that minor play-in, would say, oh, come on, man, what you telling me, North, Mouse, Optic, you tell me they wouldn't have beaten Vici, or they wouldn't have include any of those teams in that minor play. Everyone would have said that. But to be fair, we had it was best of one, but even so, we had the fucking play-in, and they didn't. So fair play to that initiative. So it made its point to some degree.
Yeah, I thought it was super good. It was super fun. We had it on in the green room in Atlanta, and we were just screaming, China's number one, naturally.
By the way, one thing I will say,
banged North out. That's so amazing. 16-8. It wasn't even competitive.
I love
Sorry,
it.
that's all I had. I'm blown away by that.
Here's the bad thing, right? is when you were saying there, Bleh, about Valde. Well, the thing is, cause Valde has such good English, like he's one of those people, like some of those Scandinavian players should just stop saying that they're not that good in English.
They speak English better than Americans.
That's the point. They are so good in English that they know that they're not amazing. It's like, as soon as you get good enough to actually know that, like you've already passed the threshold, mate. Like you have amazing English. So the thing is, on paper, if you're Valde, you should have a lot of options. Like for real, someone like FaZe should be an option. Mouse Sports should be an option. You know, American teams, all options, right? The downside is this. I just saw the other day, it might even have been today, Moses, on Instagram, that Valde posted a picture of himself, because I think it's his birthday or something. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but he posted a picture of himself when he was a kid, and in the picture, it's him with an FC Copenhagen shirt on.
Yeah.
And he says, like, I was a boy, like, in football. Like, it's not in the accent, but whatever. It didn't sound like me, did it? So you can tell it's Valde, right? So, like, yeah, I was wearing a t-shirt when I was a young lad from FC Copenhagen. And when I was a boy, I liked football a lot. And now I'm actually playing for an esports team that also at Copenhagen. So anyway, that's how he obviously would have said it. But yeah, he had a very deep voice as an 11-year-old boy. It was weird, actually. A lot of people thought he was quite adult, back then. No, but my point is this. Like, it's already bad enough, Moses, that he's probably going to stay in this team. But if it's literally the team that is partnered with his boyhood football club, like he's just going to be. He's a true believer, and he's drinking that Kool-Aid every day.
And there's something admirable about that, and I think you need a little bit of that in esports.
It's like Automatic staying in Cloud9, right? If Cloud9 does turn around to be good in the end, I think you have to give Automatic extra props for being a baller.
It's like franchise players, right? And you see it in every sport, and you see it. Those are always the guy who become the local hero. Barry Sanders with the Lions never had any chance of winning anything, but he stayed there throughout his career and everything like that. And you need players like that, especially in an industry like esports where team changes and roster changes and player swaps are so common, and we're trying to build these sponsor relationships over long-term years, but you only have these players for a year, blah, blah, blah. That gets into the business side. But yeah, I think that's not bad, and he's definitely a player that you can obviously build around if any of the other Danish players would step up. I really liked what I saw at a refresh in Portugal when he played for Cloud9. I thought he was a very interesting talent. Outside of that, it's all guys who feel like they still need a little bit more time. Like, unless you're going to go the route of bringing, a Cajun or a config or these known quantities in, which I wouldn't necessarily do, you're looking at the Mertz and the Gades, who everyone kind of watches, and then everyone says, not bad, nothing special, but they need a little bit more time to adjust into pro play. So, I mean, this North team, it's looking like if they're going to continue on this route and kind of make some roster changes, I think it's going to be towards the end of 2019 where you're going to see some real improvement. Like, they're going to have to go young. Other than that, you just got to pray that Valde doesn't get poached. Because if I'm every team that needs a player, the first person I'm looking at right now is Valde. And I'm just saying, you're a smart player. You're great in terms of attitude. You're ultra dedicated, individually skilled, that you could be on Astralis and you could probably be one of their better performers if you got plugged into that team. So, he's the golden goose at the moment for this North team. And you have to do whatever it is to placate him. At a certain point, you'd hope that he steps up and says, something has to change. We have to start winning right now. Yeah. I noticed by all of your silence that I've just won the game.
It's because they're all you have to realize, Moses, like, they're still in that phase of the show where they're afraid to talk on their own accord. They're waiting for me to say, like, you may speak, peasant. And then they're like, oh, thank you, my noble siege lord. Here is my report on North. Is my opinion acceptable to you? And then I'm like, yes, for now. Now listen to me say stuff for the next 20 minutes. No, all right. So the other side of that coin, the slightly more shot up other face of Two-Face in this scenario, because obviously the Two-Face of North Optic is just two sides of a coin.
Yeah, just two
scarred. Like, so there's no light and dark to that one. What about the Optic side of the equation then? Because what's bizarre is they share a lot of similarities. A couple of players you might keep, a couple of players a bit more questionable, but they are distinctly different teams. So maybe you start us off on this one, Phoebe. What do you think about Optic?
Everyone is making excuses for Yugi not really being the impressive second star, and people say, yeah, Snappy is not a particularly effective IGL for them, which I agree with. He's not really done a lot with a team that should be achieving stuff, but Yugi was under Snappy's leadership on Heroic and did well, but on this Optic lineup he has just not really done much. And I think that Yugi is just, for me, the far more disappointing part of Optic as a player.
You expect you expect way more from him, like as a.
I think a lot of people did, Moses. If you go and look at the end of like 2017, but I think a lot of people had him listed as like he's going to be the next Danish star. He's going to be fucking amazing, and he had some potential. You know, I've seen a few games that didn't look terrible, but it clearly didn't become that in 2018, though.
No, I think it was Katowice 2 years ago where they had knocked out SK in group stage and Virtus Pro in group stage or something like that back in 2017. That Yugi had a couple of really nice games. Well, I mean, what is the ceiling for this Optic team ideally if Yugi and Config were playing at their level? Like what is
like if I transport myself back, right? Bear in mind it's like I've said, the last few roster moves they've done aren't really that big a difference. Like fucking Gade for Nico for the refresh. It's like at the moment that's a fucking push. Like whatever, we haven't seen as big a difference. So bearing in mind they've essentially had the same type of team for the whole time. If I rewind the team back to when the lineup was made, on paper, some of these names look good. You know, I could have seen how this could have... Like, I could have seen a world in which this team could have been, like, the 7th best team in the world. Like, I would have put them in a position, like... I would say when Big was at their best, that's what Optic could have been like. They could have been a team who was, like, you know, could make playoffs, could occasionally have an upset win. Probably not that often, but, you know, you'd pick them to beat most teams below them in most matchups. Like, you've got just enough firepower to be good. You've got a decent system in theory. I thought they'd be a pretty decently well-rounded team, whereas actually what I've seen in the server looks so mad one-dimensional. I'm amazed they've just kept the project going this long. Like, it's one of those bizarre scenarios where, say as much as you like about North, they have actually made a lot of cuts. Optics kind of just rode with the same sort of call the whole way. And seemingly, what's bizarre is have you noticed we never hear anything about Optic from the org? Like, we never hear any comment on whether they're disappointed. Like, people saw that thing with Wimp going nuts on Twitter. I don't hear shit from Optic. I don't hear anything from Mill. They seem fine.
It strikes me as they just have a team in order to have a team in Counter-Strike.
That's kind of true, right? Like the only one from like the org who I know associated with the team would be Raga. That's the only guy I think I know from the org like who talks or tweets about the team, right? I don't know anyone else in the org. Unlike North, who got Wimp, they got so many people in that org dealing with the team directly. So yeah, that is kind of interesting. Weird.
It's crazy though because I know they have Hex, right, and I like Hex, and I just saw them in Dallas a few months ago. But like I feel like they've had like 3 sales of ownership in the past like 2 years. Yeah. So if you're part of it, and I know they had a bunch of staff cuts as well to different.
I think it was even implied that they might sell again.
Yeah, and there was just a report I think 2 weeks ago that they're selling like part of the stake for like 150 million. So I guess if you're part of like management, you have other things on your mind than your Counter-Strike team that's in MDL or whatever they're in.
Counter-Strike hasn't been kind to them.
My biggest issue with this Optic lineup is. Well, there's a couple things. Obviously, Yugi's one of them, but that's minor. For me, like Refresh, I don't see him doing well playing in this team. But if you go back and watch him on Cloud9 in Portugal, I thought he had a great tournament and individually looked very talented, very skilled, very like precise, very fast aim. My biggest issue with this Optic team, and I'm gonna have to put him on blast, is Config. Is like. This guy was once considered to be one of the best players in the world. Like, this is the guy, remember, who just pulled his fucking balls out and knifed someone in a one-on-one in overtime at the major. This is a guy who helped carry Dignitas to a fucking epicenter victory. Like, what's happened to him? Why is there such this drop-off? And if you're going to be the best player on your team, it feels like, and maybe this is asking too much of people, but I always have this view is like, Config's the one I feel, if you know Config or you've talked to him in real life, he has a very engaging and energetic and charismatic personality. He's like kind of like the center of personality when he's in a group. And if you put that dynamic into a team, he's got to be the one that is like showing the attitude that the rest of his team has to have if they want to be good, right? Like he's got to be the one showing that he's dedicated. Like this is the level of dedication it requires. And I don't get that impression that he's doing that. And I just don't see improvements out of that team with as much young talent between Refresh and Yugi. And then they have Cajun and Config as these experienced guys. I feel like this team should be improving at a much better rate.
That's one of the problems with that team in general, though, is like that's another aspect that's very weird. Is like, especially another thing is you don't see the players comment very much. Like I've noticed Snappy occasionally made tweets, but generally people aren't tweeting like super mad about stuff, super happy about the odd upset. Like actually some of the players even look like they've sort of checked out and they're just fucking cruising and seeing what comes next. Like if we make a roster move, great. If I leave and I go elsewhere, great. That's the big problem is though, like it's like I said before, imagine you are either org. So yeah, obviously if I'm North, I'd love to try and get config back and see how that works. But it's like, who am I trading for that? Like, what are they going to take Kirby for config? Like, you're going to have to get some, basically you're going to have to convince the other side of the potential you can't convince your own fucking team of. Because logically, if you can convince them, it's like, why don't you keep Kirby then if he's so good? It's like, oh, yes, yes, true. Well, we have a rule about only having one player with the name beginning with K. What a shame. Anyway, so there you go. Yes, we have a similar rule where no players with the letter J. Yugi, what do you mean? That's why the real scenario, and I do have to wonder about this, is obviously for both teams, there's a part of you just wants to give either team to Carrigan and see what happens.
You might as well.
Here's the other reason why as well. Like as you say, Moses, not even just like it'll work. Here's the reason I would do it as a bare minimum is because when you give the team to Carrigan, you will at least find out which players are really good. That was what he did in FaZe. He just weeded out the players one by one till he found a good lineup, and then he added Nico. That's literally what the guy did.
That was Kerrigan's best move as the in-game leader of FaZe is when he came in and he said, I want Kiyoshima off the bench. And he just saw that. And he just traded, he just swapped out, I think it was Jacob for Kiyo, and they instantly became a contender for the trophy. So at least bring Kerrigan in to get you started to build some kind of a foundation, right? Like Kerrigan can carve out, even if he's not, I'm not going to say he's not ever going to again, but he might not ever win a tier 1 tournament again, but I think he can carve out a very good and lucrative spot for himself as a team builder for the tier 2 guys and see where they can go from there. So you give him a bunch of talent, and he seems to be very good in the honeymoon period and finding out very quickly how everyone likes to play and where everyone likes to be. So yeah, get him in there and have him fix that shit.
Especially because, as we said with the whole Valdi angle, it's not the same with config because obviously he doesn't really pop off as much. But I kind of do feel like I haven't given up on him as being a really good player. So I actually think if looking at all the players, if anyone from Denmark was going to go international, I would like it to be config. At this point in time, why doesn't he go to a mouse spots or someone? I think that's someone who could do amazing work. And, if a chance to play a completely new style of Counter-Strike, you don't have to do any of the shit you did before. Let's see if you actually are as good a player as you make out. Go then, Moses. Pick a team you want to talk about. What's an interesting team at the moment?
You know what I find interesting at the moment? This MIBR lineup. Can I just say, I don't think they're going to be as good as people expect.
Why is that?
I'm not sold on the hype of bringing back these lineups that worked a year ago. I'm not on that train. And there was a reason why this lineup didn't broke up in the first place, right? Phelps and Fur couldn't figure out how to be aggressive together. Phelps didn't enjoy all the travel or for whatever it was. Maybe there were some internal issues, but I am not sold on this MIBR team coming right back and being a top 5 team in the world.
See, what I love is, right, the way that, because when you said about intimating about Phelps's end when he was in SK, that is one of the all-time great ones. Because I've always told people, I actually have a lot of respect for how harsh the cuts are in MIBR, because I don't think it's a coincidence that they've managed to course correct much quicker than most other cores. Once they start losing, they don't wait the whole year where you don't get any trophies and then go, right, well, after a whole year, now we'll make a move. As people know, they already would have made moves on the Stewie and Tarek angle faster than that. It's just that the fact that they had we have North American players made it a lot trickier, and then they had massive buyouts, and there was actually the other factors that stopped them being quicker on that one. So the Phelps one was very unique in as much as what they did was they didn't just straight cut him, and in fact they to this day deny that he was ever cut. What they did was, after he had that tournament at Malmo where he made the one push onto Inferno and fucked it up at B, right? And then they lost the map, they lost the series, G2 went on and won the whole tournament. After that was where they had those, they had some top 4s, and they were losing to Liquid again and again, and then eventually they booted him. Right, here's the thing. It's what they actually did was they just sort of decided right, well, we're not going to cut you, but we are just going to leave you out to motherfucking dry. And then they just left him there, right? Every fan every day was just in. His alarm clock was just his phone just people like, Corojo, kill yourself. And like every single day was like that. Every match they lost was like that. And so eventually, guess what? Eventually, like, you know, he broke under fucking the psychological strain. And he was like, I can't do this anymore. And they were like, it's like big, like, oh, it's a shame to find that out. But I guess we'll just have to place you on the bench then. Anyway, could you just sign this waiver saying that this in fact was your choice? Right, thank you. You are now sentenced to playing with KNG. No, I changed my mind. I don't want to play. No, too late. Play with that guy.
KNG and FNX.
Exactly.
Yeah, this team. I think this team is going to be. I think it's going to be a relatively tough wake up call for this lineup. And I love those players. I like all of them. I like coldzera. I think Taco and Zeus are incredible players and parts of a team. And obviously there's Fallen there. It's full of amazing players. But I don't think that it's going to be the cakewalk that people, and especially Brazilian fans, seem to think.
I've got a question. You know what, Moses? Like, normally, especially because these two are so quiet, normally we should be allied against them and we should be turning our powers against them. But I'm going to have to go at you for a second here, mate.
Right,
here's all I have to ask is this, because this is what I don't understand, okay, is on one level, I wouldn't put you in the category with some of the ridiculous people in the scene, but on one level, you are someone who has some like faith in stats. Like generally they represent who the best players are, right? Players who have good stats.
I wouldn't. No, I usually go more for like eye test.
Okay.
I go more for eye test, which is an issue in its own way. To be honest with you,
it's just the other people like you who aren't a fan of the whole support term angle. I've noticed that you might not be aware of this, but the people you are peers with in that sense, the people who are aligned with your view on that, are all the stats people, by the way. And that's one of the reasons why they don't believe in the concept of a support role. They think it's an excuse for players who have bad stats to still be allowed to play in top teams because, you know, they're friends or they're great guys or they're fucking cool personalities. Like that's normally what most people bundle together, as well as the idea of no support role. And the reason why I think that's very interesting is I've noticed a lot of the people who do that. So the famous example recently that's brought this up is replacing Taco with Stewie2K and Team Liquid, because it brings up the question, does a support role exist? Was Taco doing it? Is he one of the best at it? In which case, is it actually an upgrade to bring in Stewie2K? Because on paper, statistically, Stewie2K, I mean, admittedly from MIBR, only marginally better on paper because he hasn't had very good stats there. But, you know, on paper, he's statistically a better player. So the angle I would go with is this. I understand everyone's argument right up to that point. The part I don't understand is this. Why aren't all those people arguing that Taco's a shit player then? Because statistically, he's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing on the stats telling you this is a good player. Especially, by the way, not a player who should be in like top 3 or 4 teams in the world. No way. If stats really are indicators of how good you are and no one's doing a support role, it doesn't exist. Everyone's just doing different roles. Like, we need a name for a new role that doesn't get high stats, or someone has to explain to me why this guy's got anything to add at all.
Because Taco actually has a great understanding of the game, and if you watch Taco play, like he's very good with impact plays, and he's very good at knowing when he's supposed to make the play. And it's not necessarily that he's a support player in that sense. It's that, you know, we know coldzera is one of the best players in the world, and we know coldzera likes to bait, and he does the right kind of bait. So you need Taco to be the person who's going to be willing to be baited to go first to give coldzera that space. Coldzera doesn't like to take the fights where he's the one turning the corner with a flashbang going off behind him to get that first kill. He wants to be the guy following it up and then following up that trade with a follow-up, a double kill for him in the round. So I would go... You know, Taco's incredible in that regard, that he's willing to be so sacrificial. He's willing to be an anchor, which is a tough role, and he's willing to be the guy that sets up his other teammates. So in that sense, yeah, he's a support player. But my opinion of support player, and the fact that I don't think the role exists, so to speak, isn't because of stats. I feel like it's probably the complete opposite way, where I think being a support player is a role that everyone in the game has to be good at. Like all 5 players on your team have to know how to be in a support position, because it's not like 1.6. It's not so static that you are always going to be the support player in every situation. You never know how the moves across the map are going to work out. And you have to be intelligent when it comes to supporting your teammates so that they can make a play. But if you look at some of like the great teams and the great players, like think of coldzera when MIBR and SK were dominant. He was the support player to Taco. He was supporting Taco, who was entering, clearing up close corners, and then setting up. And then they would swap halfway through the round. If you look at Astralis now, Device is the support player for the first 20, 30 seconds of rounds. You'll notice Device, when he has an AWP, throws all of his utility immediately to set other teammates up to do something good or to get map control in the early parts of the game. And then he doesn't have to fucking worry about nades, and he just gets to use his ult for the rest of the round. So we see all these tendencies of the star players actually being the support players as well. So this idea that there can just be this, support player who's just this vacuum of talent and impact who just sits there and sets everyone else up is insane. I just don't. I think it's morphed too much, and I think people use an older definition for it.
I think, yeah, go on.
No, it's all you, go.
No, I just wanted to touch upon, I think the big issue here would be the definition, right? Talking about support player, like you mentioned, I completely agree with you over the fact that everyone has to be support player by setting your teammate up. I think the term most people would be looking to use would be the bitch role, so to speak, right? Like you're the guy who is going to be going in, like for example, entering or being, the entry or enabling your star player who is supporting you to go into that. Like, let's take Colter and Taco, for example, right? Colter flashes for Taco, whatever, he makes him go in, and then Colter comes in and mops at the remaining players, which Taco would have conveyed information. Okay, this guy's there, this guy's over there. So that's kind of like the bitch role. I think that's what people miss out on. People just talk about support role. I think that's a different definition from someone who has to play, who has a mentality to play, these sort of roles. We can go back to how we were talking with Smooya earlier on, where he's like, I don't like playing this particular, held back style of CS, so I just want to go out and go JWS or whatever. And then we have someone like Taco who's willing to do those plays, who's willing to go for those role-based, defined plays, so to speak, where he won't necessarily get those frags. He might even just bottom frag throughout the entire tournament, but he enables his teams to win rounds or to win, games. And I think that's a different definition on its own. It's not a support role. It's more like, the bitch role, so to speak. And I think he's one of the few players whose temperament, whose mentality, like allows him to play that. And I can kind of see, if you look at some of the star players who would be really, unwilling or not willing to do that, because they're like, hey, I can, why am I going in? Why can't I be the second guy going in? And let's not forget, even if you look at Counter-Strike, many of these players are very young. They are very emotional. They aren't really matured, so to speak. They're not used to playing as a part of a structured team, so to speak,
We're going to need another term other than bitch roll for the broadcast.
Just the B-roll. Let's go.
As a heads up. Yeah,
Let's roll some B-roll.
Let's do the B-roll.
Not bad. That's not bad, actually. That's a good, nice euphemism. We'll work on it. What do you think, Dualism, the new MIBR lineup, which is the old SK lineup?
I don't think it is suddenly going to come back and be like old SK and suddenly just wipe the floor with everybody. I think when they still had Tarek and Stewie and they challenged Astralis at whatever tournament it was, it's like, okay, that's great. And I think by bringing back Phelps and Taco, you think, okay, you're gonna be able to do well, but I think to expect them to be at the level they were before, or even at a ridiculously high level, is just blind optimism. And I think that the only advantage is that Phelps and Taco are going back knowing what made it not work in the end for them previously. So for Taco, hopefully it just kind of improves his mentality more, and so he's not gonna necessarily listen to Reddit and such where people are going, haha, you suck, and he can kind of just go, well, now the community is maybe a little bit more aware of his role and will be, well, not kinder, but he can kind of manage it better personally.
But
hopefully, at least in terms of MIBR fans, I mean, just the fact that Liquid alone beat MIBR almost every fucking time they play them, you would think would have won a little bit of respect for the guy. Like, same with Zeus, Like, people don't realize, I'll probably do a piece about that. Like, you will actually be shocked when you find out how many times Zeus's team, Liquid teams, have beaten SK. It's nuts. It's like something like 10 times in series or something. It's really insane. Like, I think they might have only lost a couple compared to that. So, like, people don't realize, unfortunately, like, that was like a mad one-sided matchup itself. So that to me is the key factor, like I've said in past episodes. It's like kind of what you've alluded to there. It's like, it's not like you're literally winding the clock back and you have to start again from step zero. You're going in knowing what you knew from last time. So like the three angles for me that make this different is, one, there was no Zeus when they had Phelps. So already for me, if you actually listen to what Zeus did when he was in Luminosity, it sounds like he was already playing less the like X's and O's coach of like, we need to do this differently. It was more like he was the guy who made it so you can have Coldzera and you can have Fur all in one team and people don't have massive fucking, you know, career-ending arguments that tear things apart, you know. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence, by the way, that he leaves right around the time, like just before, a few months before FNX leaves the team. You know, like that move happened before, remember, because there was a couple of months before when he was in Immortals, that was when the FNX thing fell apart. So there was no Zeus at that point in time. He might still be in the team if that was the case. Then you've got the angle of, like you said, with Taco, they kind of did like what they did with what I described with Phelps there. They just basically left him out to dry, let everyone wreck him completely in the community. Because here's the reason why I think they do that, by the way. On one level, I respect it. It's kind of like a pressure cooker thing of like, if you can't keep up to standard, then you will be scrutinized. You know, we're trying to be the best team in the world here. We're not trying to be a good team. Because, you know, there's other teams where you see them. I mean, Smiths is a good example. The players come out, and whether they agree, whether they're lying or not, they come out and they say, you know, people should stop being so harsh on insert name of teammate. He's a good guy, you know, or he does more than, like the famous angle is the ultimate get out for pros is you say, oh, he does all these things that you guys can't see, but honest, just believe me in that. He definitely does do them all. Like, and so you have to just go, yeah, whatever. I guess you're right then, since you're a good player. You can't tell this cunt how to fucking play the game well, but okay. So when they do that angle, then the last one is the Phelps one. And actually the Phelps one is the one that I'm the most hopeful about. Because first of all, that guy has seen, just like what it's funny because what KNG just did for INTZ at that minor where he was just hard carrying and they was shit, is what Phelps was doing in that fucking NTC lineup. Like, he was just the one who was going off and the rest of them were terrible. Like, it was really depressing. So I would hope, because I'm in the second part of my Fallen Reflections, which I'm actually, by the time this episode comes out, it will already be released. There's a part where Fallen touches on this and he basically says that Phelps was someone where, because they were winning, you sort of couldn't tell him that he was making a mistake. His logic was like, well, who cares, we're winning. And so that you can see how that could obviously be a very detrimental mentality, especially because what people forget is when you stop winning, well, you still play tournaments every single month. So when you hit the period where you're not winning, you might have like 5 or 6 tournaments that go badly. That's why if you notice, the best teams are the ones that can sort of address a problem before it makes you lose the game.
Yeah,
a lot of ifs there, a lot of wide open space there.
No, I think the cool thing about Phelps coming back with the fact that he has been out in the wilderness for a year, right? And like you mentioned, he's been, forced to play in teams which are much lower caliber than SK, MIBR, whoever they were, whatever they were called back then. So yeah, I think I have the most hope for him because he's seen how rough it can get when you have to like carry a team when the rest of your teammates' structure is not there close to what you were playing with once upon a time. So whatever the issues they have, I don't think anyone really knows what really happened down there, but him coming back hopefully has a better approach, better mentality, because the guy does have the skill set, right? So I kind of agree with Jason that, yeah, sure, they're not going to be performing to the level with some of the Brazilian fans are expecting, but I do believe they can actually potentially at least be a little bit better than the previous lineup with the 2 Americans.
That's not going to be tough.
I know a good team to talk about, and that's going to be Mouse Sports. Because obviously, first of all, they just failed the minor. But secondly, this was another team that had a lot of big names that were in that top 20 list. Obviously, a lot of people look at the names and they think, hey, this is a team we should keep together. What do you think about Mouse Sports? Because it doesn't look like they're in a good spot at the moment.
Fuck them. Literally.
Fan.
Oh,
you come into a minor and you get banged out and you give an interview that says we didn't practice for the minor. Fuck you.
Yeah, that was very surprising, right? You look at all these other teams, like, sure, the EU minor was kind of a very rough thing for everyone, right? But you saw all the other teams after that lost, they were looking crushed. They were like, I was just listening to them in the lobby. They were like, oh, we could have done this better, could have done that better. Mousebot's like, yeah, we didn't practice enough. That was very unexpected. I mean,
so Mousebots actually went with the classic UK excuse, because the old joke is, right, in the UK what you used to do is if you win you go, ha, dickhead, I don't even play this game that much, I'm beating you. And then what you do is if you lose you just go, who even fucking cares, you're just playing this game every night, I fucking try hard, I'm just having fun. I'm just having fun. It's like, but the bad thing is they used to say that on a pro level as well, like, come on, we're all nerds playing a game.
let's be honest, I don't think Mousesports are having fun at all. They were definitely not having fun, right? And the way they got bagged out, I mean, okay, let's take a look at the minor shows. Okay, Vitality and ENCE ENCE at least were the firm favorites, at least for me, right? Then you have X-Space Soldiers, you have an Optic who have done jack shit in quite a while. Valence, who surprised everyone, they were also an underdog. Wendigo, for fuck's sake, and you come 5th to 6th, I think. Sure, it didn't bottom out, but it's just like not qualifying, not even getting a 3rd spot is an unacceptable result. And I think almost all of us, like in the green room, just talking about it, we're like, yeah, this team is done. At least when it comes to this particular lineup, something has to change. This is unacceptable. You're a top 5 team. You have so much talent. Something has to go. Like, something has to change. I don't know, Chris J, Oscar, it's just unacceptable, right? We're talking about North and Optic underperforming. Mousesports, like, this is the big thing over here. Like Jason said, like, unacceptable, complete unacceptable. You do not come in unprepared for a fucking minor, for fuck's sake.
If I'm the Mousesports org, I'm so fucking pissed off right now. I'm even kind of pissed off, not even have any relation to Mousesports. That's so fucked up. That is the amount of good players you have on that team. You were what, top 3 at the beginning of 2018. You were in that spot throughout a lot of the year. A dangerous squad. The snacks experiment didn't work, and you have to prove that bringing Stico back, you can still be a contender. And you come into the minor without practicing. If I'm management, I'm going in. Who didn't want to practice, and why didn't you practice? And I'm firing every single person who has anything to do with either one of those. Like, you're just gone.
There is an angle that's a problem on this one, though, Moses, which is, if you remember last year, there was an event where famously Mousesports didn't play with Oscar. They played with nothing. It was the ESL Belo Horizonte event in Brazil. And one of the reasons that people don't understand what went on at that event, like, well, why was Oscar not there? And then why were the rumours that they might kick him, etc., is because basically Oscar didn't want to go to that event and just thought, like, fuck this. Like, it's not even like the biggest event, it doesn't have all the best teams. Like, it's, I just don't want to go to this one. You have to go all the way to Brazil to fly and take part in it. Well, that basically was just like the moment where it was the breaking point for Oscar. What people don't seem to realise is if you go and look how many fucking tournaments Mousesports played, they were one of the most active teams in the entire world. They used to literally basically say yes to every tournament. They were just at all of them, all the Star Series, everything you can find pretty much. And so as a result, those guys, I thought, got mad overworked. Like, that org pimped those guys the fuck out.
Yeah, probably.
It's like if you're the fucking manager of a porn star, you at least give them some fucking days to heal up. You don't just keep going, oh, well, back to back. You got a fucking 10-man tomorrow. Like, fucking hell. I've only just finished fucking putting the ointment on and going to bed on this big cushion that I've got. Yeah, Can I get a motherfucking break? Can I get this weekend off?
Duncan, they had 6 weeks of ointment. It was out of Christmas break and out of the January break.
6 weeks.
They came in all lubed up and ready to take some more.
The problem is, though, that's also the downside of Mousesports, is because you look at what a weird group of people they have. Imagine how different their life experiences are when they're not together. They don't have that same connection outside of the server. Because obviously, on the one hand, Oscar literally only just got all the fucking Father Christmas beard out of his hair, that was on. He was there playing it for his whole family. Father Christmas doesn't talk very much this year, children. Take the presents. It's like... And then, gives them one really amazing present. Listen, gives them one really amazing present. This is a joke about Oscar's play style. And then, bizarrely, there's another present that's in a really big box, and there's almost nothing in there. It's like, what the fuck? I don't know what to expect with you, Father Christmas. I thought you were brilliant. You are sometimes, but... It's bizarre. You can just fall off so hard. And then the other thing is, on the other end of the spectrum, obviously Rops woke up at about 5 a.m. on Christmas Day, ran down with his big wide eyes. Oh my God, did I get the talk boy? Is it the talk boy? And then he opened up the fucking Megazord or whatever he got out. It's like, yay, sick. It's got the power sword activated. He was like, it's like pressing all the buttons on the back. So obviously, and then meanwhile, Chris J just sat in an empty bed sit, just looking at wall like, really must do better in these Counter-Strike tournaments. I don't know why, for some reason, that in my brain's his family life. But
right. Phoebe, any thoughts on the Megatron sword?
Any thoughts on Mousesports?
I feel like it. Yeah, with Oscar then also not wanting to literally go to events in the past, and the fact that they say that they didn't practice, that just smacks of somebody on the team doesn't want to really play. Or if there's some people that want to practice and others who don't, obviously you can't really do much in those situations. And obviously the Chris J liking the tweet about the lineup, it's like if they were happy and they were all thinking everything was okay now that Stiko is back and hey, it's going to be good for them, they wouldn't be having that level of issue. And
here's what I worry about though. I've just realised this. Oh, Moses, I've just realised this. This is going to tilt me so hard. You know who's fucking pals with Smoothie, don't you? Good old Chris J, isn't he? And then what? Oh, that's right. Smoothie's decided to bench himself, has he? All right. Well, tell you what, we won't be unfair. We'll just have a little competition for this AWP spot. Who knows how to say the word fucking anti-disestablishmentation? Like, fuck you. Like, we all, this better not be what I think's happening. This better not be some, like, slow roll to, like, replacing Oscar with fucking Smoothie.
That would actually depress me as well. I think it would be, because I think if we're going to talk about mouse sports, I think it would be kind of a cool idea for Chris J to go to FaZe. I think that'd be a really interesting.
Wait a minute. Everyone.
Don't get tilted off the
face. Just calm down, everyone. I've got this under control. We're not going to let him just get away with saying these things. Because throw any ideas out there. Yeah, but the problem with that scenario, Moses, is like, I vaguely get where you're going with it, but that's like saying some shit like, you know what? I reckon Pimp should just really upgrade with his girlfriend, just go for the hottest girl in the whole scene. It's like, yeah, but why the fuck would she want him? Like, what's this analogy? Like, I sort of get why Chris J would want to go to FaZe, but why does FaZe want Chris J?
Well, I don't know if they actually do, but I'll tell you why I think he would fit well. I think he's obviously a very solid double op setup guy to come in. Who's a former like primary op or natural op, very talented. He's been in-game leading mouse sports. FaZe needs an in-game leader. He's also not the in-game leader that's going to be super structured, which you're never going to get FaZe to do to begin with. He has a loose style of calling that has proven to be more effective than Kerrigan's loose calling over the past year. And on top of that, we've seen him at stages in mouse sports using SMGs and just basic rifles and whatever he can get his hands on to run out and be the entry fragger and to be the guy who initiates contact for mouse sports to give space for the team, which FaZe does not have. They have a bunch of assholes who like to sit back in choke points and take mid-range fights, and no one likes to get dirty and go in first. So now all of a sudden you've got an in-game leader who likes to go in first, who can double op, and who's willing to be the entry and who's willing to get his ass kicked by the first guy out the gate.
That's what I like, by the way. It's like, you know that old question that fans think's a great question, but it's actually a rubbish one, which is, well, which player, if you made 5 versions of them and made them play a team, would win the game? You know, because the problem with that answer every time is you always just end up picking an all-rounder, because obviously they're the only one that could basically like make a team that would have any balance. Like you pick like Shocks or someone, you know. That's a question where like, I'm not even joking, I've even seen fans say who had like the SK flare on, and it's like, well, I don't want to break it to you, homie, but it ain't Cold Zero. Like, let me see that 5 Cold Zero team, mate. Like, I want to see that team going in on T side. They never attack anything. You haven't thought this one through, have you guys? Like,
the only one you could do like that is actually Simple, because he is insane enough to.
It has to be someone who's just got a mad all-round game. Yeah. That's why it's not actually that great a question, you know. I get where they think they're coming from on it. All right, but here's the thing about mouse sports is, while I will say they might not have money to do massive buyouts, I know they did the Snacks buyout, but obviously, if anything, they thought better of that. So admittedly, it's not as simple as getting anyone, but they are a team where, considering how good they are and the fact that they, in theory, take from any country that can speak English, they obviously do have a massive pool of players they could choose from. So what do you actually think? Like, if you had to pick a player, you have to remove one player from Mouse. Who do you want to remove?
I would get in a player who could, I think, give a semblance of, not structure, but like a culture in this team, right? If you look at all the players in this lineup, like you have Robs, he's a young kid, right? You have Sticko, he's the guy who got kicked, comes back in, he's a support guy. You have Sunny, he's a Finn. You have Chris J, and then of course you have Oscar, who didn't go to a tournament because he didn't feel like going, right? I think there's a lack of culture. I'm talking about like a competitive sort of a vibe in this team, and I don't think any one of these guys bring it. Sure, Chris J, he's calling in the server, that's great, but you need to have like a leadership quantity, which I think he is lacking. I'm not trying to blame him for this. It could be because of the rest of the teammates as well.
No, but he wears pajama pants outside the game. You can't be a leader and fucking wear PJs everywhere.
Listen, Jason.
No,
like, if you go back,
he does dress like in a movie when they go to the drug dealer's house to get the stash directly. Like, they come out and like fucking like pajama pants, big chin on, you know, like fucking glasses that they only wear indoors. Like he does look very much like he's just like that scene out of fucking Training Day or whatever.
I mean, Spartans were naked. They used to be naked running into their, fucking battles and shit. So I think pants are overrated. The point is, I would get someone. I would remove Oscar. I'd let Chris J just go full-fledged opping with the opping role. I think is good enough to carry that particular weight. I think Robs is great. I think Sunny is a fucking he's gold. Sticko also stick around. I think he could do some work, but I would get a player who could give a semblance of not structure, of hunger. I want to win, like someone who really wants to win. From that perspective, I would fucking pick up Valde and just make Chris J continue playing. At least maybe that guy is so hungry, so desperately wants to win. Maybe that might influence the rest of the team, right? There's the lack of hunger in that team, and that's what I see. I would want to get someone who could instill that into them. I can't think of anyone right now. Maybe a Carrigan. I don't know.
No, I actually think that's a good point. Here's what scares me the most. Has Mousesports gone past like the point of no return, where even if they make a change, like if you're Sunny, are you not sitting here scratching, stroking your beard and just saying, "Oh, Ence's looking pretty good. Would be nice to move home back to Finland." And
I will say this, Moses. I will say this. I get what you're saying, right? I would like that move to happen, to see Ence be better and to see what Finland could do. I will just say this though: if that involves any kind of pay cut. Actually, it's a round world, Moses. I think nationalism's sort of a dated philosophy, and I believe in globalism now, actually. So, Sonny, don't go back to Ence and play for fucking 2 Red Bulls and a fucking Eurocent or whatever they pay you there.
Obviously that'd be different, but you know what I mean, right? Like he's looking there and he's like, you know what, this mouse thing, I don't like playing with these guys. It's not fun. I want to go to Ence. And then all of a sudden Mousesports comes in and goes, Sonny, we really want you to stay. We'll kick whoever you want out of the team just to make you happy, and we'll bring in whoever you want. And Sonny says, all right, I want you to kick, player X and bring in player Y. And then a month later, they lose an event, and Sonny goes, fuck it, I'm out. Anyways.
Is Sonny the sort of guy who seems to like fun, though?
I don't know if Sonny's actually ever said that.
No, but what you're saying actually, as far as I know, was implied. Like, I believe if you piece together all the interviews last year, like it was already said by Sonny, I believe, in like a Finnish interview that he'd had like an offer from FaZe Clan or something nuts like that. And so it was implied, if you look at the fact that they not only did the roster move of Kick and Stickle, but then later they were going to potentially kick Oscar around the time, actually, funnily enough, just before they got Stickle back. If you add it all together, I could believe that there's a world in which that was one of the things that happened. Like all the players in the team knew that this guy could leave and go to a FaZe Clan, and they'd be left high and dry. And so I don't know that means it was his move, but I imagine he probably was allowed a big say in what they did with the team over the year, because he kind of you'd usually, it's like the Cold Zero to Team Liquid angle. You try to keep that player happy in theory. Could believe it. It's probably not impossible.
No, it's a weird situation, I think, with this Mousesports team, and obviously everything I said was mostly just conjecture and kind of story building.
Well, who would you pick then? Who would you pick to remove Moses?
I already did this last year, and I got in trouble for it. I'm the same with Bleh. I would take Oscar. If anyone, I would remove Oscar. And last time we did this, I said the exact same thing, like right before DreamHack Stockholm, and I think I had everyone on Twitter tagging Oscar into like the tweet and being like, Moses said that you suck and should be removed. And I was like, great. So that was fun. Had a nice little chat with him at the Stockholm after party. So thanks all you assholes on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't think my career could survive that, but fuck it.
It was a fun conversation.
Right. Phoebe, which Mousesports player do you want to resent you?
I mean, I'm gonna be boring and also say Oscar because, I'm not very creative, but I do think that I think by removing him, it's I think what you have left can be built upon more than if you kicked someone like Rops or Sunny.
The biggest problem that there is with Oscar isn't necessarily how good he is, because he's obviously an incredible player. He's a little bit up and down for my liking in an op player, but more than anything, you just have 2 super talented young riflers in Sunny and Rops. Like those guys are fucking untouchable. Chris J is pretty much untouchable because he's in-game leading for a team that has so many different languages, and you probably can't get anyone like Rops and Sunny aren't going to do that. Oscar's not going to. You need to have Chris J in there. Stico's a good piece. You could try removing him if you wanted. They've already been down that road, so I think they would kind of pass over that for now. Like Oscar's just the one that makes sense.
Unfortunately, in terms of trying to do a plausible move, I actually think you've just nailed it at the end there, which is that unfortunately, basically Rops and Sonny, unless they play absolutely dreadfully and for a long period of time, are very unlikely to be removed. Like Rops, because he's so young, in your brain, you think to yourself, well, let's say it does take him another year, but he then becomes really good. I don't want to be the guy who let him go and now either has to buy him back or just doesn't have that talent, you know, because in theory, you picked him up, he's like a free lottery ticket. You got him for pretty much nothing. So you on that one, you're just going to, it's the sunken cost fallacy. You're going to be willing to gamble a bit longer and see if that kind of pays off. The Sonny angle, as you said, he's already hotly contested elsewhere, and probably you might not even have him for that much longer anyways. You may as well ride it out. So unfortunately, by that logic, you end up with people like Oscar and Sticko again. You get back to that. Because the thing is, I personally think Oscar's the best player in mouse sports. Like, I think the rest of them have had a couple of months where they were very good, but Oscar's the only one where if you look at all their big tournaments, he pretty much always is the guy who's one of the absolute best players on the team. So I personally...
Except for Belo Horizonte.
Well, the guy who replaced him did go fucking like minus 30 or something, so, you know.
But it was a spirited performance up there on the stage. He left his heart.
You know what? He was one of the greatest minus 30 players we've ever seen in this game. You know, not since the days. That's how you know, by the way, that like this entire community can just go fuck itself. Because if you're going to use stats, you've got to use stats. Like, you can't then go on another day. I don't feel like using stats today. Like, I'd say myself, I use the eye test primarily. Like, that's my main thing. And then I try and reason my way through it. Because the same people who to this day would say, well, this player should be removed because his stats are bad, literally used to defend fucking Fiflaren after his team won a major with him going like minus 72 over the tournament. Like, that means this guy was literally just like, if that was like he was carried the whole way to the major. Like, and at the end, you're just like, oh, I believe in stats, but I'm just going to ignore this massive outlier of the worst performance ever by anyone ever won and just say this guy was really good.
Did a lot of things that don't show up on the score sheet, Duncan.
He did a lot of things that do fucking show up on the score sheet. That was the problem though, isn't it? Yeah, they didn't erase that, did it? Tell you what, he did a lot of shit with a fucking grey screen, didn't he? And then he also spent a lot... That's probably why he was so intelligent about the game. He's watching other motherfuckers' screens half the time, wasn't he? You know, well, how can Nico be that smart? He's watching his own screen. He's alive all the time, isn't he? He's never gotten to experience any... You know that famous saying, like, you know, a man who doesn't read books has only lived one life. That's like Nico. He's only ever played from one perspective, hasn't he? Like, Fiflaren's lived that hundreds of lives, you know, at least 4 other lives most of the time. He basically was a coach before the coaching rule. So anyway, I would say this.
Anyway,
I personally would take out Chris J and put in Carrigan. And that's not any slight on Chris J, it's just if Carrigan's available. Again, same reason with the Optic one. First of all, I'll find out which players are good. I'll potentially get an upgrade. He brings exactly the kind of culture Blair's talking about. He's a guy who has high demands of himself and expectations, etc. And again, like I say, the angle I like on it is, unless Carrigan turns out to be a bad in-game leader, I'll leave that caveat possible, I guess. If he can do his thing, you're at least going to get a sense for these guys of what they're good at and where you could put them, etc. Right, let's pick another team then. What would be another good team to talk about?
This has got to be my last one. I got to go.
Yeah, okay.
15 minutes.
All right, I forgot about that. Actually. Yeah, let's pick one last one then.
I vote Phoebe picks. Pick an interesting one. Don't fuck it up.
Can be any team.
No pressure whatsoever.
Can be any team in the world. Your choice.
You know,
dealer's choice.
Top 20 team, let's say. If you pick Kinguin, I'm going to be upset.
Like, who's interesting? who's actually worth talking about?
I mean... Yeah, wow, that's... maybe Fnatic? I don't know, I really can't think.
Okay. Fnatic, where we're going with this one?
Good old Fnatic.
I feel like the fact that this is going to be the first major where they're not a Legends team, I think.
Sure.
Be. But they've obviously they've lost Flusher and they've got Brolin and it's an interesting lineup, I suppose.
It still feels like this team is just straight hard carried by Crims. Like, if they didn't have Crims, like, I feel like Twist and Brolin still aren't there. Like, they seem to have, like, good games at times, and then they kind of fade away, and I think they need to find a little bit more comfort. And Krim seems to be the one who props them up through stretches of games. I am going to be a beast, and you will have 6 rounds to suck before you warm up and get into this game type thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, he would be the rock in this team, right? But I think they looked really promising when this lineup was announced, right? We had Roland and Twist, you know, out in the Swedish cold, the wilderness for so long. Finally gets called up a Fnatic, and they actually I think, to a pretty damn good level. We spoke with Roland for such a long time, like at least that's the beginning of last year, like, this young Swedish kid is going to be a star, blah, blah, blah. And he really didn't do much, right, with all the lineups he was on. I think it was Godsend or Red Reserve for one point in time. I think they looked really promising, that third place placing at, was it New York? Chicago, yeah. They look pretty damn solid there. I mean, they were the only team who almost took down Astralis, right? They were the closest team to...
They should have.
Actually, they should have won that game. I mean, some great comebacks. They kind of like slacked off a little bit in the end, whatnot, but they were the best looking team apart from Astralis. They looked real solid. Haven't seen much from them. I saw them in Abu Dhabi for the PLG event or whatever, which of course was kind of a clusterfuck, but at the same time, they looked very solid, although they did get almost upset by Force, the Russian team, which you didn't see in the CIS minor, who in my books has been looking really solid as well. I don't think we've seen too much from them to really say that they are a question mark. I think they can be pretty dangerous. I expect them to at least make their way, to the top 6, maybe even legend stage, at the very least in the major. I'm not going to read too much into iBuy Power Masters, to be honest, though.
Here's what's weird to me about Fnatic is every time I finish watching them play a game, I'm like, they are a really cool, really fun, really interesting team to watch. I think there's a lot of potential here. But while I'm watching them, I'm just like, what the fuck is happening on this team? Why is no one able to kill anything? Why is it only Crims performing well? Like it is like, I do get super excited to see them play because I think that they're a very interesting team. But for whatever reason, like it doesn't translate to when they're actually playing the game. And then I'm just like, this is frustrating and everyone sucks. I don't know why. I don't have a really good answer for that one.
Just hate Swedish CS, man. Yeah.
To be honest, I just don't really know what the Swedish scene is in general, though, because it's the same with NIP. Like, both teams have some good players, and both teams seem to play, quite frankly, like old-style Counter-Strike, where you play, I wouldn't say, like, free-for-all entirely, but each person seems to have a lot of sort of autonomy over what they do within the round. And, like, that's the reason why in Sweden they always, like, it's such a vague term, but they always, like, emphasize, like, team play. Because like their logic is like, if we fit together so well, then we could do anything in a round, which sounds great because if you have the tools to do it, like classic Fnatic, yeah, you're going to be the best team because how can you adapt to a team that can do anything, right? It sounds sick, but the threshold you have to hit to make that style really work is really hard. Like to have the players who actually can make that work is fucking tough. Like I at least can, sort of logically resolve what I think a team like an Optic's trying to do if they're trying to do tactics, but it seems like Fnatic and NIP, because it looks from the outside as a naive observer, it just looks like it's all on player form. If the individual players play sick, yeah, we can win the game. If they don't, what hope is there?
That is true. Like I don't really see a style. Like we talk about the old school. The during the Envy Fnatic days, you had that hive mind sort of like just run and gun, lose CS sort of thing. And I think they're still trying to stick to it to a certain degree. I don't really see much of a particular defined style, which you see nowadays with most of the top teams, right? Every team has a particular methodology in the way they're approaching the game. And I still don't see it with the Swedish teams, nor even with NIP. And I think that could be a problem. I completely agree. Crims is, you expect Crims to frag out of his mind, which he does almost every single time. And if they're lucky, maybe Broland steps up. Broland look promising. That's the thing. They've looked promising. They've only played very few tournaments since they came together, this particular lineup. But unless they do have some semblance of an idea of how they want to play this game, of how they want to approach the game as a team, as a unit, it could be a big problem because right now they're going to be facing off against a number of teams who have at least been working on the system, working on a style of CS, which could be a problem. I think this free-flowing style of CS is kind of dead, and they don't really have the firepower to pull it off either. I mean, Crims, maybe Roland might have a good day. Twist has really disappointed me, even for the past 1 year, even since he joined Fnatic. JW has his moments. That's Crims. That's all. That's it. That's all they have, right? So I think it depends on what they're feeling or what they had for breakfast in that particular day. I think that's what it's going to boil down to. I don't see them really, having something which is going to impress us, at least from a tactical standpoint.
Right, you picked the team, Phoebe, so give us your thoughts before we finish this episode.
I think the fact that Broland is now on that team and everybody has been saying since he was like 15, like, oh, he's going to be amazing and he is undoubtedly talented. I think that if he and Crims are both at a high enough level and JW at least holds up, I think that that they could be pretty good, and I think that they should be able to make top 8 if all of the pieces come together and it is sort of their day.
Because the reason why I kind of agree with you, Moses, like I think it's a fun team, is because the funny thing is, on paper, the names don't look that crazy in this team. So I actually feel like they're a pretty solid team. Like, if you asked me just on the paper roster, I probably wouldn't give them a chance to do as well as they do. Like, actually, as they seem to generally, like, for as much as I said about their style, there it works to some degree. I'm just kind of with a lot of you on the, like, I don't really know if this is the right players. But, I mean, they're also a scenario where pragmatically there's not that many choices. It's not like they can just take all the NIP players, you know. Like, I actually feel like sooner or later there's probably another shuffle between those two teams that makes an interesting lineup. But that's a bit down the road at this point in time. They're probably just going to hold these two calls at the moment.
Yeah, I'm wondering when the Swedish scene is going to make that turn. Like, it still seems like they're...
The real question is if they're ever going to actually have, like, not all this shit of, like, oh, they could maybe compete. Wow, remember that time they almost won a big game? It's like, I want to know when there's going to be a real Swedish team that's like, this is the team that actually is number 2 in the world. That, you know, they won the last 2 big tournaments. Like, they are the team everyone wants to be. When's that going to happen? It feels like, I have to say it feels like never again.
I think Bleh nailed it. It's going to take a while, I think, because they, like, even Fnatic and NIP still playing this like looser style, which seems to be going out. And if you don't remember, Fnatic, to make that style work was so impressive. Like, you had to have perfect pieces to make that work for as long as they did, like back in 2015, 2014, 2016. I don't think it's going to be as successful today because it's just an inconsistent style in general. And the fact that no other teams are really running it should tell you something. So I think it's going to take a little bit for the younger players to have a new in-game leader and kind of build up a new way of playing the game that can take on, the old guard. And at the moment, they're just locked out.
You got to remember, like, whenever Fnatic had that streak as well, just to touch upon what you said, Jason, was they had, like, in that streak when they were kings, they had a period where it was Flusha, who was the best player in the world, and had Crimson being the best player in the world, and then it was all off for the longest. I think that was the last stretch they had, right? So when your style of CS depends on one of your players or two of your players being the absolute best players on the planet, that's not going to work.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point.
It's kind of strange if you think about it. Like Denmark, Sweden, like these are the traditional CS countries. So if it comes to like from back in 1.6 and back in the day, apart from Astralis, there's no one else. We've been talking about Optic and Heroic and all these other guys and North, and then we're talking about the Swedish thing with NiP and Fnatic and, dare I say, Existence Galaxy, Barbara's team, whatever. There's no one. There's literally no one there who stepped up to the plate. Although we all know that there is talent there.
Well, I have to say as well, one thing that must be very tough for the Swedish scene is it's actually a victim of its own success, because since in 1.6 they were just the gods of CS, and even when, like, people don't realize it was so ridiculous that, like, the first half of 1.6 you would literally have tournaments where, like, 2 of the top 3 teams were Swedish, and it's like sometimes they were just battling each other to see who won the fucking championship. Well, people know that part when, like, Heaton and Porty, etc. are around. What people don't know is even the era when we were like, finally, it's not about just Sweden, there's a Danish team was very good, a Polish team was very good, Ukrainian team. Even then, you would still have like 2 of the top 5 teams in the world be Swedish. Like, they would still overall, by aggregate, have the most better teams than anyone else in the scene had. But the problem is this, there was 2 strategies they used to use to recruit. The Fnatic teams generally used to recruit based on like social setting. They wanted someone who like was a professional like them and wasn't going to party too much and was going to like fit the scene and wouldn't have a big ego. And then the SK guys, which was like Roban and Valle and some of these guys, their approach was just recruit the best players. Like, what they would do is, the way you would get recruited to their team is you would be on a team that was just below them. You would beat them at like a qualifier for World Cyber Games or something, ESWC. You'd beat them at some domestic Swedish land, basically. You'd individually pop off in the game, and then they'd be like, right, whoever's we currently think is the worst player, because they also didn't seem to in that team to acknowledge team roles. Whoever's the worst player, just remove them, bring in who this hot new talent is. First of all, you cut down your rival, but more importantly, you put more like new blood into your own team. And those were the 2 different approaches they took over time. Well, if you look in CSGO, they have largely done the former option of like just taking people they'd liked to play with. That's why you've seen the Fnatic guys constantly reunite over and over again. That's why NIP took so long to remove the original 5 players. The problem is they don't have the other option. Like, where are the teams that, like I said before, with the setup that you had where teams used to play domestically in their own countries as well, where is the team that could even show you that there's some stud Swedish player out there by getting an upset? Like, that team doesn't exist, and you don't play in competitions in that way. Like, the weird thing is now, you can't get NiP's attention by beating them. You probably have to beat all of Tier 2 in Europe and get into some tournament and then show yourself. So it's like, unfortunately, the old method of getting the players just doesn't exist anymore.
This actually reminds me of this theory I had with regards to like when Fnatic kind of fell off and he had all the other teams take over, right? I kind of felt like, is it because of the CS culture Sweden had? While they might have tasted a lot of success back in the day, like if you look at Karn, for example, right, one of the most successful in-game leaders in Counter-Strike history. But if you look at his calling style, like you said, he's more of a culture thing, it's more free-flowing style. He kind of like brought out the best in his place. It wasn't like a highly tactical style like MTW used to have, or even like some of the other teams back in the day. And then, like you mentioned, Roban was more like, getting some of the best players out there, just go out and frag, right? And that shifted over to NiP when they started playing. It wasn't a highly tactical style of CS. They just had the best players on the planet. Then you had Fnatic. Again, they had the best players on the planet, like all of Crimson in their heyday, right? There was never a culture, I kind of feel like, where it cultivated in-game leaders or leaders, so to speak, in the Swedish scene. So what happened was you have a lot of like star players, whatever, people trying to frag and be raw fraggers. But it came a point where when the old guard kind of like fell off, there was no one to take up the mantle. Look at the Danish scene, for example. Even though, yes, North's struggling, Optic is struggling, and everyone's struggling, but there's no dearth of leaders, of in-game leaders. We can be like, okay, let's pick up Carrigan, let's pick up MSL, let's pick up Snappy. There's so many people you can build a team around. When it comes to Sweden, I don't see anyone out there. Sure, Exist can't call. Sure, for NiP, we have Force can call, whoever are taking turns being in-game leader, but there's no leader, so to speak. And I sometimes question whether that culture, which gave them so much success in 1.6, kind of, bit them in the ass later on.
This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, James Harding, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, Tristan Jones, and a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for upcoming content of mine? Perhaps you'd like to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA. Do you want some teasers to see who the next guests are for my talk shows, for my interviews? Maybe you'd like to take part in a monthly esports discussion with yours truly. Well, put your money where your mouth is at the Patreon link in the description box below and join the Scrilluminati today.